it. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask if there are any bill introductions from anybody on the committee, anybody in the audience. Do we have any bill introductions? Okay. We only have until February 2nd to accept bill introductions, and that is not that far away. It's next Monday. All right, committee. I think you've got all of your information in front of you, and even though we're still waiting for a couple folks, I'm going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 352. Senate Bill 352, the short title is just creating the Bitcoin and Digital Assets Reserve Fund and providing definitions, procedures, and requirements for abandoned digital assets. So Eileen, would you like to brief us on that bill, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 352 adds digital assets to the Uniform Unclaimed Property Act by establishing definitions, procedures, and requirements for digital assets, and it creates the Bitcoin and Digital Assets Reserve Fund. Section 1 of the bill establishes the Bitcoin and Digital Assets Reserve Fund with the state treasurer as administrator for the fund. And the fund is to consist of all airdrops, staking rewards, and interest earned pursuant to the procedure established in KSA 58-3952. The state treasurer will credit 10% of each deposit of digital funds to the state general fund. Section 2 of the bill amends KSA 58-3934, which is the definition section for the Unclaimed Property Act. And here we're adding the definitions of airdrop to subsection B and digital assets in subsection F, and stake or staking in subsection S. Section 3 of the bill amends KSA 58-3935, which is the statute that describes when property is presumed to be abandoned. The provisions pertaining to digital assets have been added in subsection A16, which provides that the digital assets will be presumed to be abandoned 3 years after a written or electronic communication is returned to the owner as undeliverable. That 3-year presumption of abandonment period would cease immediately upon the exercise of an act of ownership interest in the digital asset or by a written, oral, or electronic communication with the holder of the digital asset. And we have actions that would constitute an act of ownership interest listed in subparagraphs A through E. Those are on the top of page 7 of the bill. Section 4 of the bill amends KSA 58-3952, which is the statute that describes the process by which the unclaimed property holder pays, delivers, or causes to be paid or delivered the unclaimed property. The provisions pertaining to those digital assets have been added in subsection F. Essentially, the holder of the digital asset reports and delivers the digital asset in its native form to the administrator or the administrator's qualified custodian within 30 days after reporting that the digital asset is abandoned. If the administrator so directs, the qualified custodian may stake to receive rewards or receive airdrops. After expiration of the 3-year presumption of abandonment period, and if the property remains unclaimed, any airdrops or staking rewards would be transferred to the Bitcoin and Digital Assets Fund established in Section 1. Lastly, we have Section 5 of the bill, and it pertains to the sale of abandoned property. The provisions added as subsection D apply to digital assets and provide that the administrator shall sell digital assets that are listed on an established digital asset exchange at the prevailing prices on the exchange at the time of sale. The administrator is prohibited from selling an asset listed on such a digital exchange at less than the prevailing price listed on the exchange at the time of the sale. And if the digital asset is not listed on an established exchange, then the administrator can sell the asset by any commercially, pardon me, I need my coffee, any commercially available reasonable method. And if approved, the bill would take effect upon its publication in the statute book. And with that, Madam Chair, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you very much. I know this is kind of new terminology for some folks. Do you have any questions of the reviser? Senator Gossage?
Yes, could you just repeat that for us? No, I'm just kidding.
I can after the caffeine kicks in.
That was a good one. Okay. Committee, if no questions, we may have some after we hear our presentations, but we know where you are. You're right in front of us. So our first proponent is Senator Craig Bowser. Craig, would you want to come up, introduce yourself, and welcome to committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Great privilege to be here with you today. We're going to talk about something really important here, and that is creating a state digital asset reserve fund using unclaimed digital assets. And as we all know, our world is becoming more and more digital. It's not just physical anymore. We don't currently have any laws in Kansas surrounding unclaimed digital assets. According to Angelo Douglas, who wrote an article for CGAA a year ago, January 2025, he estimates there's $1 trillion, with a T, $1 trillion in unclaimed digital assets. This is a result of lost or forgotten digital wallets, abandoned exchanges, abandoned digital accounts, and unclaimed rewards. While the exact amount of unclaimed digital currency here in Kansas is a little difficult to determine, one thing is clear. There's a lot of money out there in digital assets waiting to be claimed. Coinbase in 2024 turned over to the state of Wyoming, which is 3 times smaller in population in terms of population than Kansas is. Coinbase turned over $270 million to the state of Wyoming in unclaimed digital assets. Our Kansas laws are not keeping up with technology and are designed for physical assets, not digital assets. Recently, California and other states have updated their unclaimed property law to include digital assets, requiring companies to notify owners of dormant accounts and report them to the state after 3 years of inactivity. SB 352 would do exactly that, as our reviser so eloquently reminded us. This bill creates a new framework for managing abandoned digital assets and establishes a Bitcoin and reserve digital asset fund in the state treasury. The bill amends our current Kansas property laws to explicitly recognize digital assets, including cryptocurrencies and virtual currencies, and to establish a framework for their custody, management, and potential sale. If passed, the Kansas legislature would place oversight for this fund with the Kansas State Treasurer. Under this bill, unclaimed digital assets like Bitcoin would be transferred to the state after 3 years of inactivity, following undelivered written or electronic communication to the owner. To be clear, unclaimed digital assets in this law would only apply to custodial assets held by legally defined holders, such as exchanges, banks, trust companies, and other licensed custodian. It would not apply to self-custodied wallets. The 3-year abandonment clock begins only after written electronic communications to the owner is returned as undelivered and stops immediately if the owner signs into their account or responds to that written communication. Unlike many traditional forms of unclaimed property, the bill allows these assets to be delivered and held in their native digital asset form rather than immediately liquidated. What does that mean? That means if Coinbase, for example, a cryptocurrency exchange, has an abandoned Bitcoin, after 3 years they would give the state of Kansas that Bitcoin. We would not be able to immediately convert that to cash. We have to hold it in a one-for-one exchange. We have to hold that Bitcoin and try to find the owner of the Bitcoin. If we do find him, we give him back the Bitcoin. Make sense? And as the reviser mentioned, any staking rewards or airdropping assets generated after 3 years would be transferred to the Bitcoin Digital Asset Reserve Fund, creating a mechanism for the state to accumulate digital assets over time. Again, this is a new concept. We're creating a strategic reserve here for our state. In a notable provision, the bill prohibits Bitcoin from being deposited in the state's general fund would create a strategic reserve for our state. Kansas would retain Bitcoin as part of its reserve while directing up to 10% of the deposits of non-Bitcoin assets into the state general fund, contingent upon legislative appropriations. This legislation, again, creates clear structure for Bitcoin as a long-term reserve asset rather than a short-term resource. The bill also lays out how the state would handle the sale of digital assets. Cryptocurrencies that trade on established exchanges would have to be sold at market prices, while assets without active exchange listings could be sold using other commercially reasonable methods. The goal of this is to minimize market disruption while adding clearer guardrails around how the state-held digital assets are managed. So here's the big question. Here's what you're asking yourself, and here's what's important to understand. Why would Kansas want to have, or why do we need a Bitcoin strategic reserve, a Bitcoin digital asset reserve? Well, there's a lot of different reasons. I'm going to go over a couple of them. Number one, hedge against inflation and fiat currency devaluation. Bitcoin has a fixed supply. There's only 21 million Bitcoin to ever be produced. So it's a fixed supply, and his historical performance positions it at the top as a protection against inflation, currency weakening, or excessive money printing at the federal level. States see it as a way to preserve purchasing power over long periods of time. A second reason is portfolio diversification. Every good investor knows you don't want to just have stocks in your portfolio. You want to have stocks and bonds and maybe gold and maybe real estate. You want to have a diversified portfolio. That's exactly what Bitcoin does. Adding Bitcoin to the state reserves alongside traditional assets like stocks and bonds, precious metals, reduces reliance on any single asset class or fiat system, again, potentially lowering the overall risk of volatile economic conditions. Here's a third reason: potential for significant long-term appreciation. Bitcoin has historically, I don't know, how long has it been around? 15 years or more? Just blows away, it's been blowing away all other forms of assets in terms of return on investment. And if it continues its historical trend upward, the reserve could generate substantial returns for the state treasury, rainy day fund, or public benefit. These benefits might include building infrastructure, funding education, or reducing debt. Here's a fourth reason: first mover or competitive advantages. States that establish reserves early position themselves ahead of what's called the reserve race, attracting crypto-related businesses, talent, mining operations, and investment in our state and cryptocurrencies. This can boost economic development, innovation, and job creation in the blockchain and digital asset sector. Simply put, early adopters can capture gains from adaption growth. Here's a fifth reason: it signals that our state is forward-thinking and innovative. Adopting Bitcoin signals forward-thinking governance, legitimacy for cryptocurrencies, and this also is going to align our state with emerging digital financial trends. If you read the news, you'll see what they're doing at the federal level. Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, that is becoming a federal trend. We're going to follow that trend or lead in that trend. Here's a final reason: transparency and auditability. Bitcoin's public blockchain allows real-time verifiable auditing of holdings, which provides more transparency than a lot of other traditional reserve assets. Because we will use unclaimed digital assets to start our strategic reserve fund, there would be virtually no cost to the state to get hold of these cryptocurrencies. Therefore, it's seen as a low-risk, opportunistic way to build exposure to digital assets without spending direct state funds to acquire Bitcoin or other digital assets. Passing SB 352 would position Kansas alongside 30 other states who have already passed legislation or are considering similar legislation. And again, this legislation mirrors what's happening at the federal level. And for these reasons, I strongly urge the committee to pass this legislation. Let's move this ball forward. And I'll just close by, I want to thank our revisers who worked on this a lot this summer and were very helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. I think we'll hold our questions until we've heard from all the conferees. Just keep note of what your questions are. I have a few myself. It is new information for those of us who are not as forward-thinking and maybe a little on the fuddy-duddy side. Okay. I meant that in the kindest way. Okay, so our next conferee is Eric Baker, Director of Advocacy. Eric, there you are. You went that direction. Please come forward, introduce yourself. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Dietrich, Vice Chair Vag, Ranking Member Miller, and members of the committee. My name is Eric Baker. I'm the Director of Advocacy for Satoshi Action Fund. It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit digital asset policy organization, and I'm here today to speak in support of SB 352, which modernizes Kansas's unclaimed property law for the digital age while creating a strategic reserve fund that benefits both citizens and the state. To start, I want to profusely thank Senator Bowser for introducing a strong bill that supports Kansas Bitcoin and cryptocurrency holders, all while helping grow the state's coffers. I'd like to specifically outline how this bill delivers results for Kansas. First, Kansas is home to thousands of cryptocurrency holders, yet the current unclaimed property statutes were written before Bitcoin even existed. When digital assets are abandoned due to forgotten passwords, lost devices, or deceased owners, there's no clear legal framework for handling them. SB 352 fixes this gap with a thoughtful, forward-thinking approach. Next, the bill protects Kansas cryptocurrency holders. Under current law, abandoned property is often immediately liquidated. SB 352 requires that digital assets be preserved in their native form and held by qualified, licensed custodians, banks, trust companies, or special purpose depository institutions. This is critical because cryptocurrency values can fluctuate significantly. An owner who reclaims their Bitcoin 2 years later could receive an asset worth substantially more than if it had been sold immediately. The bill also cleverly allows some of these assets to be staked during custody, potentially earning rewards. This means abandoned assets can actually grow in value while waiting to be claimed, benefiting the rightful owner when they come forward and the state in the process. Next, this bill creates the Bitcoin and Digital Assets Reserve Fund, establishing Kansas as a forward-thinking state by creating this reserve fund. Now, of course, Senator Bowser explained a bit, but here's how it works. When digital assets remain unclaimed for 3 years, any staking rewards, essentially the interest earned on these assets, can transfer to this new fund. This creates a new revenue stream for Kansas without raising taxes or selling the underlying assets. 10% of the deposits into this reserve fund go directly to the state general fund, providing immediate fiscal benefits. The remaining 90% builds a strategic reserve of digital assets that could appreciate significantly over time. Several states and even nations are establishing similar reserves, recognizing that digital assets represent the future of finance. The bill also includes important safeguards for when unclaimed digital assets must eventually be sold. Assets listed on exchanges cannot be sold below prevailing market prices, protecting both owners and the state from predatory pricing. Other assets must be sold through commercially reasonable methods, ensuring fair value. SB 352 establishes clear abandonment standards specific to digital assets. An asset is considered abandoned after 3 years of no communication following undeliverable correspondence. However, any activity accessing the account, making a transaction, or simply logging in immediately resets this timeline. This is a reasonable balance that protects truly abandoned property while respecting active owners. Next, this bill modernizes statutes to promote economic growth. By establishing clear, modern, unclaimed property rules for digital assets, we signal to cryptocurrency investors and business owners that Kansas understands this their business and provides legal certainty. This could attract additional blockchain investments to the state of Kansas. The bill demonstrates fiscal innovation. Rather than treating digital assets as a problem to be liquidated immediately, we're treating them as an opportunity. The reserve fund could grow substantially, providing future revenue without current taxpayer burden. The 10% allocation to the general fund provides immediate benefit, while the reserve builds long-term value. Overall, it's a strong bill. However, we do offer 4 friendly amendments to help strengthen the bill further. These amendments do 4 things, and they should be listed in the written testimony as well. First, we want to clarify fiduciary status. Unclaimed digital assets should remain the property of the owner, and only revenue derived from custody is treated as state-usable funds. Second, limit general fund transfers. The 10% transfer applies only to staking rewards, airdrops, and interest. Just clarifying that piece. No principal digital assets would be deposited into the general fund. Third, create an explicit Bitcoin acquisition authority. The treasurer may use net digital asset revenue to acquire Bitcoin. And also Bitcoin acquired becomes a long-term reserve asset for the state. Fourth, preserve legislative control. Spending authority must remain subject to appropriation, and custodial integrity of unclaimed property would be preserved. With that, we commit to working with Senator Bowser, this committee, and the Treasurer's Office as well to reach the strongest possible product. In the end, SB 352 accomplishes 3 critical goals. It protects Kansas cryptocurrency owners by preserving their asset in native form. It creates a strategic reserve fund that could generate significant future value for the state, and it establishes Kansas as a leader in digital asset policy. This is a smart, forward-thinking piece of legislation that benefits citizens, supports emerging industries, and strengthens state finances. Therefore, I urge you to support Senate Bill 352 and stand prepared to help answer any questions or clarifications.
Thank you, Eric. I think we'll hear from the State Treasurer's Office, and then we'll stop for questions, because we don't have any opponents, but we do have a neutral. Would that be all right? Thank you for being here. Stick around. Yes, John, would you want to come forward as our neutral conferee?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, good morning. And it's my pleasure to appear before you to speak to this bill on behalf of the State Treasurer's Office. I'm John Hedges, Deputy General Counsel for the State Treasurer. That means I'm very involved in just about everything our office does, particularly with respect to this bill, the operation of our unclaimed property program. And this bill deals with 2 very important areas that the State Treasurer and all of the staff of the agency take very seriously. And in fact, we take a lot of joy in these programs. Our responsibility is to conserve and manage the financial resources of the state on behalf of all Kansans. And we have another responsibility to return lost assets to their rightful owners through the state's unclaimed property program. And I think we're pretty good at doing both of those things. The conferees have both emphasized the fact that finances are changing. A lot of states are considering cryptocurrency as a new type of asset. And I think that policy consideration is absolutely appropriate. Our office is not here to opine on the policy of this, which is why we're appearing as a neutral conferee. Whatever the policy of the committee and of the legislature, if this bill expresses that policy, we have a number of practical considerations that we hope the legislature would address. And I feel like I should apologize for a rather complicated fiscal note. I'll get into specifically the fiscal aspect in a moment, but this is a complicated bill. There are a lot of unknowns. And a lot of the fiscal note, which you have, and my written testimony does deal with the unclaimed property operations side of that. And I'll give you a little bit more history on that in a moment. But before that, I do want to mention a couple of aspects with respect to the reserve fund itself. First, the proposed funding of this reserve, as the prior conferees have noted, is different from how we currently treat unclaimed property. And it's also, for that matter, different from the federal proposal. As proposed and established by the President's executive order last spring, the Federal Reserve Fund is to be funded through digital assets forfeited to the U.S. government, through criminal and civil law enforcement proceedings, and sort of Bitcoin fines in connection with those proceedings. In other words, the reserve is made up of digital assets already owned by the U.S. government. In contrast, this bill would create a reserve, as the other proponents have noted. It's funded through proceeds from digital assets remitted to our office as unclaimed property. In other words, it charges the state treasurer's office with using the property of Kansans to create more digital assets. And then, to put it crudely, we scrape those assets off the top if the assets remain unclaimed after 3 years. And what the interest, the stake rewards, the drops, those are grabbed by the state treasurer and put into the state coffers. It's absolutely a creative approach. It's absolutely on the cutting edge of state finance, but I just want to point out that it's a different sort of philosophy and a different manner of operating than we do for the remainder of unclaimed property, which is to hold the property in trust forever for the benefit of the owner. And that includes interest, which may be earned on certain interest-bearing property. We hold it in trust forever for the owner until they can come to our office and claim their property. It may be a valid policy to fund a cryptocurrency reserve in this new manner. I just want to emphasize that it's a different way of treating unclaimed property than we have until this time. Another problem with the reserve fund, the bill simply establishes the reserve fund. It provides very little guidance on how the state treasurer manages it. Of course, we like to know what the policy of the legislature is when we make those sort of investment decisions. And if a reserve fund is established, we would hope to get a very more clear picture of parameters for managing that fund so that our office can ensure that the legislative policy is accomplished. Turning back to the sort of the practical aspects, which is the meat of our fiscal note and the sort of bulk of the practical concern the office has. As I mentioned, the cost on this thing is sort of crazy. There's a wide variety of costs involved in this. You can take a look at the fiscal note, which I won't reiterate, but this could be from a couple $100,000 a year up to $500,000 or more. And the issue is we just don't know. And we don't know because states are on the cutting edge of making these changes. No state has really fully got a good handle around the ongoing costs of these programs. To give you a little bit of history, various states have increasingly recognized that cryptocurrency is an important part of unclaimed property, and they've taken action to sort of accommodate these digital properties into their unclaimed property programs. For many years, decades, the general preference among states' programs has been to require holders to liquidate cryptocurrency holdings immediately prior to sending them to the state. And that's what our office has asked of holders in the few times that cryptocurrency has been turned over to our office. Frankly, the decision, policy decision, so to speak, on that is there's just so much we don't know. It's very complicated to hold cryptocurrency, and as of today, our office, like a lot of unclaimed property offices, just doesn't have the resources to do that. We could get there, and states are working to get there, but as of today, the resources aren't available. So holders have accommodated us by liquidating the cryptocurrency before they turn it over to us. Starting in 2019, states started to explicitly require that the cryptocurrency be liquidated. And since that time, a dozen states have enacted statutes sort of turning this liquidation requirement into a formal state policy. And as I mentioned, the main concern is up until now, there haven't been vendors to do this work on behalf of the property in a cost-efficient manner. We remain concerned about those issues, as you can tell from our fiscal note. However, a few states have recently started to sort of switch that paradigm and ask that holders remit the property to them as cryptocurrency to be held as this bill would do. Alabama has introduced a bill that I believe they're reconsidering during their legislative session this year. The District of Columbia is now taking unclaimed property as in its native form. Arizona, I believe last year, enacted a program to do this, as in hold the cryptocurrency. California just very recently enacted their law, and I believe they're sort of in their procurement process to actualize that. And Oregon isn't under a statutory requirement, but their Unclaimed Property Authority has made the decision to do it, to hold cryptocurrency. And that is where the bulk of our fiscal note comes from. Of all the states that we're aware of, Oregon has done the most work to get their handle around these costs. In 2025, they completed an RFI process, request for information, that identified 7 to 9 vendors, depending on which you count, because some of the vendors can't do all of the work. You'd have to combine multiple vendors to hold this property. So at least 7 vendors, maybe 9 vendors are out there who could do this. In a theoretical sense, only a few of them, and maybe one, has any experience with unclaimed property. So these vendors and the states would have to work together to reorganize systems to allow the crypto side to talk to the unclaimed property side, so to speak. Oregon is still in the middle of their RFI. They have not selected a vendor, but they've graciously shared a lot of information about their process. So that's been the most comprehensive test of the market. Unfortunately, as indicated by the fiscal note, there's just no assurance on what the costs really are. And that's what makes our agency the most nervous. If this is the policy of the legislature, we're happy to take it on. We just ask that the legislature give us the policy direction and also the financial resources and time to accomplish those policy goals appropriately. I'm happy to stand for questions at the right time.
Thank you very much. The fiscal note that we have in our folder is not in its traditional form, but I think we're getting a new one, correct?
That's correct. I believe you have our response to budget. So that's just ours. There may be other agencies that have provided information to the budget, which certainly would be useful. So you have our analysis. You'll probably receive a sort of streamlined version of it from the budget office.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, committee, we are ready now for questions. We've heard from 3 conferees. Senator Gossage, you were first, and I postponed you for a second.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that you held off the questions until all of the conferees because I thought it was helpful. I would like to ask Senator Bowser how he feels about the 2 or the 4 recommended amendments, and I think that these line up with the department, if I understand that correctly.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator, thank you for that question, and indeed, they do line up, and I'm not opposed to these amendments. I think these make a very good bill even stronger, so thank you. Yep.
I may, Madam Chair, could we ask the same of the department?
Sure. Mr. Hedges?
Thank you. Well, I just saw the amendments this morning, and we haven't had a chance to, thoroughly analyze them. I will say they do clarify some of the questions that the State Treasurer had raised. One of the points that I think the proponents of this bill are trying to ensure is that the sort of the principal amount of the Bitcoin or other digital assets, these amendments do clarify that principal amount remains forever the property of the rightful owner, the Kansan who lost it. And that's helpful. That's a helpful clarification to the bill. The State Treasurer's Office also has concerns, as I explained, about sort of the obligation that the state takes on potentially to manage the cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, while it's in our possession. The bill's not clear on that. Do we have an obligation to stake these interests in order to make more cryptocurrency? And that's about all I know about that process. We might have an obligation to do that to the state on the one hand, and then to the owner in that 3-year period where they have a chance to claim that. That makes us have a lot of questions about the liability that the state takes on. Of course, there's legal risks. Some owners are not going to be happy no matter what decisions we make on that front. And of course, the same goes true if we liquidate the property. There's litigation risk that is a serious aspect that's not reflected in the fiscal note. And just a host of questions about the obligation to do that. And then, as I said, the policy question, is it the policy of the state to scrape off those earnings if they're not claimed within 3 years? It very well might be, but it's different than what we've been doing today. I don't think the amendment resolves those questions, but it is helpful to clarify with respect to the principle.
Senator Gossage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, as I was highlighting some of the concerns in the testimony from the Treasurer's Office, knowing nothing about Bitcoin or any of this other than a testimony that we had in Fed and State the other day, So it varies in how much it's worth, I understand. So if it were liquidated, depending on when it was liquidated, it could be worth a different amount of money. And so the people would have 3 years. If somebody has unclaimed property now, how long do they have to claim it?
Well, in theory and legally forever. Of course, they have a greater chance of finding it and successfully claiming it the sooner they do it. But it's possible that generations could go by and through probate documents and inheritance, the grandchildren of the owner could come forward 50 years from now and claim it. I will say it's, as I said, increasingly unlikely, but we have the obligation to hold it in trust forever if that happens.
We hold it, but we're able to get gains off of this money by investing it per se. And so therefore the state is earning money off of it, but their funds are still there if they ever need to get it. This would be different, right?
Different in the sense that, yes, the state does earn money on the unclaimed property fund until the property is claimed. However, we do pay out interest at a statutory rate pegged to the PMIB, the money that the state earns. So if a property earns interest at the time it's remitted to us, we pay out interest at the statutory rate. That, I think, is the difference with this bill. It preserves the principle of this cryptocurrency, but the interest, so to speak, accrues to the state. And the owner, if they don't claim it within 3 years, would not have the benefit of those earnings.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Hill, and Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. See, I think question to John start with. So this section F is kind of challenging for me, I guess, and it's a section that talks about unclaimed property in general and the disposition of it. There is a provision in there for selling the digital property as well, as I understand it, the way I'm reading it. So you're saying, your interpretation of that is that the state treasurer would never sell the unclaimed digital property?
Well, no, I think the best reading, our reading of that provision is that the property is sold if we've been holding it for 3 years. I will say one of the technical issues with this bill is I think it's a little unclear if we can sell it before that 3-year period. But the way I read the bill, we hold it for 3 years. If it has not been claimed within 3 years, we sell the property, liquidating it, converting it to cash. That cash remains cash available to be claimed by the owner, and any earnings that are associated with that process, earnings, the stake rewards and things, those are put into this new reserve fund.
Okay, that's kind of the way I'm reading it too. So I think it does get, and that is consistent with other financial instruments that you get currently that are unclaimed, whether it be securities or bonds or stocks. Is that kind of the way you do that as well?
Yeah, it's generally consistent with that. We hold stocks and other securities for 3 years, and we liquidate them on the market, very similar to this bill would work for cryptocurrency. The other types of property we get are unclaimed, safe deposit boxes. Of course, those are physical property. They're a little bit more difficult to liquidate, but we auction most of those types of physical property after 3 years. But as you pointed out, mostly we're talking about securities under the existing law.
Yeah, so one concern I have here is that if there is discretion of the treasurers to liquidate or not liquidate, and that's a little bit, I'm with you, it seems a little bit unclear in some of the language, whether you have discretion. I'm concerned about a perceived liability if it is not liquidated at the right time. You know, whether that's, if, for instance, if you get unclaimed digital property and you don't liquidate it immediately and it drops dramatically in value, do you have a liability for that perceived loss and vice versa? Yeah, so I mean, that's something that I'm not clear about from reading this.
On behalf of the office, we are absolutely concerned about that potential liability. We are not, up until now, in the business of managing cryptocurrency and deciding when the right time to sell is. I think as you mentioned, the right time to sell is the big question. Whenever we sell it, somebody's going to be mad if we have a fixed policy. So whatever the policy of the legislature, our office would appreciate some protections with respect to that liability.
I think Senator Bowser would like to respond to that. Is that right, Senator Hill?
Yeah.
Go ahead. And then,
Madam Chair, and yeah, let me explain the importance of the 3-year rule and why we keep it in its native form. So there's one Bitcoin, it's unclaimed digital asset. It comes to the state as a Bitcoin. We should not sell that for 3 years because somebody could come back and claim it. If it's $100,000 today and a year from now it's $1 million today and we sold it at $100,000, we now owe this guy, we owe him a lot of money. So we don't sell it, we keep it as in its native form. And then again, that cutoff at 3 years does allow us to do, it becomes state property. The unclaimed asset, whoever was the owner is relinquished, and now it becomes state property. We can do what we want to with it. So the 3-year rule and not selling it immediately is important for those reasons. We don't incur the ups and downs if we keep it in its native form for at least 3 years.
okay, Senator Hill, did you have another question?
Yeah,
Sure,
I
go
did.
ahead.
A little bit of a follow-up question. In the middle of that,
For whom? Senator Hill, who do you want to?
I'm going to ask Senator Bowser this one to start with.
Senator
'cause
Bowser.
I think we might end up there anyway. So in Section 4, Part F, it talks about private keys and the necessity of having the private key to liquidate. Is that, if there is not a private key available, what happens?
Well, that's a little bit of that's a little misleading, I think. When I think of a private key, I think of, I have a crypto wallet on my phone with some cryptocurrency on it. Maybe I have a passphrase or a code, maybe some sort of a login that I have to get there. On an exchange, if I'm doing business with, say, Coinbase, for example, they control that on the exchange, and they would be able to give it to the state or give it back to the owner. So I think that's a little maybe misleading, if I understood your question.
Yeah, so it's not a case of in perpetuity that they wouldn't have the key to access that.
Right, and in this bill, we're not going after somebody's crypto wallet. We're just going after stuff that's in approved exchanges, banks, trusts, things like that.
Okay. Yep, that'd be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Fack.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you all for your presentations. As I sit here and listen to this, I think the way we handle the consistency of how we liquidate is important. So when you say gold, silver, bonds, paintings, lock boxes, that's kind of into a new area to me. And that you auction it off and, to understand exactly when and how that works. I'm thinking that the consistency's important. And I guess I would ask the State Treasurer's Office today, but, how do you handle gold and silver? What somebody's left in their lockbox. Do you have a quarterly auction? Is it advertised? How do you liquidate that?
Could you answer that for us?
Sure. I don't think we have a unique policy for gold and silver. To my knowledge, people are not leaving silver and gold bars in their safe deposit boxes, but we do get jewelry and gold collectibles and those sort of things. With respect to all safe deposit properties, we use eBay. It's the biggest market for this kind of material. We have a vendor that manages that process for us. So I agree, the consistency in general is probably a good policy. At least it makes it easier to manage for our office. And our concern is not with the fact that we're selling the cryptocurrency necessarily. It's the fact that the bill isn't clear as to when that happens, and if we do it at the wrong time, according to someone else, what liability do we take on in doing that? To be fair, the same question happens for securities and other types of property. So if the legislature wants to help us clarify that bill with respect to all of that liability, we'd certainly be willing to work with it. Our focus here is on the new liability that would be raised by this bill.
Thank you. Senator Fagg, another question?
Yes, and one quick follow-up. I keep hearing the word interest earned on this. How do you earn interest on this? It's either an earnings or a loss.
That's a very good question, and to be perfectly honest, I don't know the answer to that. And maybe we have experts in the room who can. We're concerned with the sort of active managed earnings in the sense of stakes. Our office would use the existing cryptocurrency to make more cryptocurrency. And I don't exactly know how that process works, but maybe you can
Senator
address
Bowser, do you want to answer that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. Good question, and this is a great education learning opportunity. So I think what we're talking about here is staking. We use the term interest, but in the digital world, it's called staking. And I may have, let's say I have 100 Ethereum, and I want to stake those Ethereum. What I'm sort of doing is I'm locking my Ethereum so that they can support their network, improve the blockchain, validate the blockchain, kind of proof of work, proof of stake, that sort of thing. So in exchange for me locking my Ethereum up, I would incur some interest rate, and different cryptocurrencies offer different interest rates. It might be 3%, might be 5%, whatever it is. But when I stake my cryptocurrency, I'm agreeing to lock up my cryptocurrency for, I don't have easy access to it. If I say I want to unstake, it may take a week, it may take a month, it may take some time to unstake it. But in that meantime, while it's staked, I'm earning interest rate, if you will, and also the value of the coin is, hopefully rising as well. So hope that answers your question. Is that right, Aaron?
John, did you want to respond to that? If not, I've got two other questions here.
Very briefly, thank you. That is a much clearer explanation than my convoluted understanding. But the one concern related to that is the fact that this cryptocurrency is tied up for a period of time. That means it's not available to pay out a successful claim to the owner. That's just a practical concern that I don't think the bill addresses. Of course, if we have a lot of that type of cryptocurrency, potentially it's fungible, although I don't think it is. Just practical concerns like that, we don't know how it works, and we need some resources to learn those things, and hopefully put them in the bill to make the bill stronger.
Thank you. Senator Miller, and then Senator Haley, and then our time will be up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll keep it very brief. I guess just to address the last thing that you just said, it sounds like the main fiscal cost will be FTEs, essentially hiring new people to understand and administer this new processes.
That's correct. The expertise does not come cheap. We think we would need one in-house staff, sort of FTEs in the form of qualified vendors, so to speak, FTEs. As the fiscal note indicates, there's a wide range of costs, and we just don't know which of those types of vendors is appropriate at this time.
Thank you. And this,
Go ahead.
I'll follow up on that if I may. I'll keep it very brief, I promise. There's been a little bit of conflicting messages whether or not, or which portion of these assets would be obtained by the state, when, and how much of it. I've heard that we would keep the assets, we would keep the assets and manage those assets, and if they are claimed 2 years and 364 days into the unclaimed period, if it gains anything, is that what the state takes, and then the owner of the asset takes the original amount, or is it managed for that person and then everything is given to the owner? This might not be a question for you, actually, it might be for Senator Bowser or Mr. Baker as well, but.
I'll try to answer that. I think we all agree, within that 3-year period, so 2 years and 364 days, any interest or accruals would go to the claimant, the principal plus anything that we are able to sort of manufacture in the meantime. Mm-hmm. As soon as 3 years hits, the state gets to take the accrual, the earnings, the interest, and the principal amount, if it's ever claimed, goes to the owner.
So even 20 years from now, the owner would still get that Bitcoin, but the state would get to take what it earned from investing it by managing it.
That's correct. That's how I understand the bill, and
Yeah, okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Senator Haley,
Thank you,
briefly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And very briefly, everything is pretty much uncovered. So right now, unclaimed property is listed by the name and the amount. How would this then be listed? Would you just have an annual reporting that would say Bitcoin or to the name, the name of the claimant, or how would that now appear in your registry?
Well, as to the public registry, we generally don't make public the type of property, although if someone indicates an interest in the property, they can call
Value.
us as part of the claims process.
Value right now, so how would that?
Yeah, that's correct. It's what they see on the website. They go on our website, they see their name, they see the address that the property was associated with. Presumably, it's an address that they lived at, the claimant, at some point, and they see a dollar value attached to the property.
See a dollar value, despite the fluctuation, it's
Well, most of our property,
million to, whether it started, okay, so.
yeah, most of our property is US dollars. With securities, I don't think there is a dollar value. We might indicate it's securities. And I'm happy to get you more information on that. How it would change with this bill is a big question. And of course, states are reconfiguring their unclaimed property systems to accommodate this. We would have to do that. And I ultimately think that will happen. We just don't know how it would appear.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Committee, if you have more questions, we're going to run out of time today. Just contact one of the conferees, and they should be able to respond, or our revisor, Eileen. So at this point in time, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 352, and thank you all for being here. Committee, tomorrow, we have Senate Bill 360. It's going to be a big hearing, a lot of people. Luckily, you have an assigned seat. I'm not so sure those out there will have a place to sit. So this will be the PBM reform bill. We have 20 minutes for each side. We have the revisor who's going to brief us. Committee, I am prepared to keep the hearing open until Thursday to continue to ask questions, because I want to make sure we have all of our questions answered. On Thursday, we will be having another hearing after that, perhaps, if there's time. And then we will, on Thursday, also try and work some bills previously heard, again, if we have time. Okay? All right. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.